1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Audio test.
Hi, this is CB Radio Magazine, and very excited today to show you something new on the bench here. This is the Anytone Ares II radio, and it's been a while since we had anything that kind of broke the mold a little bit, and I think this radio falls into that category. What is really neat about this radio is they've given us the old school classic look. The larger, easy to use knobs, kind of the traditional Cobra 148 Connex Superstar type feel, but they've incorporated a ton of the newer features that you're finding on the Anytone Quad 6, Quad 5 Plus, the Lincoln 2, CRT, those types of radios. So you've got these newer radios that have all these cool functions built into them, but they're all kind of menu driven and they've got smaller knobs on them and they're a little difficult to use sometimes. So a lot of guys have been asking for a radio with this type of classic styling, but could they somehow incorporate the newer features into it? And could they make those new features easy to use so they're not having to go through menus while they're on the road? I have to say, so far, I think this radio kind of fits the bill on what those guys were asking. But let's jump in, take a look at all the features and functions, and you guys can see what this radio is all about. First thing you'll notice is a 4-pin microphone jack. You can use the existing microphone, or you can use your favorite 4-pin microphone. The radio does have the ability to switch between a dynamic or electret microphone. Next up, you'll see our volume and on-off control on the inside and our squelch control on the outside. When you turn the radio on, it does take a delayed second for it to come on. That's normal for this type of radio. Up here, you've got your traditional rectangle style meter. It has a nice white, bright white light in it, so you can easily read the numbers on there. Over here, we've got our fine on the inside and our RF gain on the outside. Fine is going to be a fine clarifier. So you got your clarifier here, RF gain on the outside. Next up is our mode switch. You got a PA, FM, AM, upper sideband, and lower sideband. So you got all the functions that you need there. Now the radio does cover quite a few frequencies, so it has them in the banks of channels. So you've got A, B, C, D, E, and F. When the radio is converted and you're using it in the 11 meter band, the D is the area you most often would be using. If you go below, you'll be in the C grouping. If you go above, you'll be in the E grouping. Next up, we've got microphone gain on the inside, variable RF power on the outside. And then we've got our channel selector knob here with our channel display. RX-TX light. Next up, we have our band switch, and it's a H for high, L for low. That will work in conjunction with the banks of frequencies here. So if you're in the A, there's both a high and a low setting for that. There's also a WX. You can get weather channels very easily on this radio. You just flip that down. Isn't that cool? And you have a total of 10 weather channel frequencies that it will go through there. So nice thing on this, you can get the weather channels. Now that hasn't been very common on a lot of the export radios, so that's a neat feature. Next up is our echo switch, and some of you guys hate echo. Some of you guys know that if you add just a hint, it can actually make you sound kind of unique on the air and not too bad. Off position, on position, but there's also a set position. Now on some of the other modern radios, to get into echo, you had to go into the menu function, go through a bunch of things, find it, adjust it, and go back out of the menu. This is actually pretty slick. You just flip it into this set position and then you'll see EL, which stands for echo level. You key the microphone. It shows you the position from 1 to 32 that you can set the echo level, the amount of echo. Next up, press the up or down button on the microphone and you get ET, echo time. Key up the microphone. Now you can set the echo time, try not to block it with my hand here, from 1 to 32. So really easy just to set your levels, unkey, go back, and you have it right where you want it. The next switch is our talkback switch and our 10 kilohertz switch. If you go into the MON monitor position, you can hear yourself through the radio when you're talking. That would be useful for setting your echo or just kind of hear how you sound. In the off position, nothing's happening. If you go down, it goes into the plus 10 kilohertz, which, as some of you know, is good for getting into some of those in-between frequencies. NRC is something new. This is something that we've had on the Anytone Quad 5 Plus, and it's something that you'll probably start to see on some other radios coming out. It stands for noise reduction circuit. So what does a noise reduction circuit do? Well, it reduces noise. Pretty obvious there, right? This actually is going to act a lot like the DSP on the West Mountain radio speakers, some of the other DSP speakers that are out there. It's digital signal processing. And to try and give an example, I've actually got a little bit of DX earlier today for when I turn this on. What will happen is you'll turn it on and it'll reduce the amount of static. It takes a second to process the audio levels and find that static, and then it kind of sucks it out of the radio so you don't hear it and you just hear the signal coming through. So let's jump to that clip so you guys get a little bit of an idea of what noise reduction circuits can do.
Yeah, so go north from that, and Soldotna is 75 miles north of that.
Noise reduction circuit on.
You have to drive through Soldotna to get to Homer, or you have to drive through Soldotna coming from
Noise reduction circuit off.
Anchorage.
So hopefully that clip gives you a better idea of how it can actually make the static disappear when you use it. It has an on position and then it has a set position. Again, this is something that's really cool because you can easily set the level you want very quickly using the microphone and this switch and your channel selector. So we've gone into the set position. We key up our microphone. We can set the level from 1 to 5. I will tell you, when you get to higher levels of signal processing, such as the way that this one's doing it, it starts to get a little bit extreme in the sense that it removes a lot of the static, but you will start to hear a little bit of a waterfall type sound, and voices will sound just a little bit warbly, even though all the noise is gone. That happens with all digital signal processing speakers I've used, and it's pretty much the same on this. So I've found the sweet spot is pretty much right around the 3 mark. Now, one more cool thing about this feature. If I press the up or down buttons, you'll see it changes to a T here. Instead of RR, it's TR. And if I key up now, what this level of noise reduction is adjusting is our noise reduction on transmit through our microphone. So this actually will reduce your outgoing noise through your microphone. So if you've got a bunch of background noise and you don't have a noise canceling speaker or something, this actually does that function. It removes the background noise and just pushes your voice through. So if you're a driver that has your window open, you might want to turn this up to 3. It is going to adjust the way you sound just a little bit through the radio, but it will reduce the background noise. So that's really unique to have it for receive and transmit, and it works quite well, as you can tell in the example, and I'll get more into that later with some of my other videos. Last feature along the top is the automatic noise limiter, or noise blank and automatic noise limiter together option on that switch. Most of you guys know what that is, just cuts back some noise that might happen from your vehicle, electrical popping, stuff like that. Down here, one thing I forgot to mention, the squelch control, as you turn it, of course, it's off right now. You can hear the static. If I turn the squelch up, it squelches it out, but it does have an automatic squelch control position. So if I put it all the way counterclockwise and then I turn to, say, channel 6 where stations are louder, they'll break the squelch. So that's an automatic squelch control. It does operate on this radio. Now to the back of the radio, we've got a heat sink here, antenna connection here, 3-pin power cord, right? A lot of you guys are going to like that. We have an external speaker jack, PA speaker, and a data connection. Yes, there is software. You can program this radio if you have the programming cable, which is sold separately. You can plug it in, hook it up to your computer, and then you can do some of the additional functions that are available through the software. I'll jump into that later. Let's go back to the front. This radio does have a menu inside of it as well, and I'll show you how we access that. I've propped the radio up just a little bit to be able to show you this a little bit easier to get into the menu, but I will show you the microphone real quick. This is the microphone, has up-down buttons and the push-to-talk on the side here. To get into the menu functions for this radio, what you're going to do is you're going to hold the up button and you're going to turn the radio on, and what you'll see is a first menu option that shows up over here when that happens. The first menu option is BP, which stands for beep. And if I key up the microphone, I press the push to talk button, you'll see it has an off, 1, 2, 3, 4, up to 5, 5 levels for the beep. Now what this means, if I enable this, and I turn off the radio and I turn the radio back on, it will beep. It'll beep every time you do anything. A lot of you guys will hate that. I don't like the beeps. Some guys, though, who are on the road don't want to bump something and not know that they've bumped something. So if you put it on maybe the lowest level, you might be able to listen to that. So anyway, we're going to hold down the button again, go back into our menu. And the next option is going to be RB, Roger Beep. Key up the radio using the push to talk, and you'll see it goes to off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 5 different Roger Beeps that are pre-programmed into the radio. Now, I believe you can also access that through the software and do some other stuff with the Roger Beeps, but we'll talk about that later. Next up is AL. This is alert for your weather frequencies. So you can turn this on or off, and if it's on and your radio's on and a weather alert comes from the National Weather Service, it'll come through the radio. Again, cool that this is on an export type radio. A lot of them haven't had weather frequencies before. All right, next up, we've got DL or D1, however you want to look at it. This is our dimmer level. If I key up, you can see I can adjust the dimming level from 1 to 3. All right, next up is NP, which stands for NPC. A lot of you guys might be familiar with negative peak compression type modifications that you might do to a radio. Basically, for you guys that don't know, the idea behind them was to boost your audio levels, to increase your peaks, but also decrease your negative peaks at the same time, so you're not sounding overmodulated, even though you are over, say, 100% modulation. Idea behind this was to give you strong modulation, but not have it sound like crap. So the factory has actually put in a switch here, and I mean, however you want to call it, an audio boost, NPC, it actually does give you a boost. And I actually looked at this on the oscilloscope to see what my waveforms looked like. And yes, it works. So NP off or on, probably most of you guys are going to run with that on most of the time. It gives you some good audio and it doesn't really overmodulate. It sounds very clear. So they have done this from the factory to give you a pretty good level with it. So very interesting feature, something we really haven't seen before on a radio from the factory. All right, our next feature is going to be our Vox level. For those of you that don't know, Vox is basically a hands-free, voice-activated type function to be able to transmit without having to do the push-to-talk. I don't use it a whole lot, but some guys do. Vox level, you can adjust the gain level for that. And then you also have your Vox delay, which you can set. And then our next feature after that, after those two for the Vox, is our scan type. There's 2 different types of scan types, and I'll show you guys those in a minute. After that, we've got the option to choose our electret type microphone or our dynamic microphone, right? So whatever you're going to use for the microphone, you want to make sure you set this accordingly to match up. From the factory, the one that comes with it is an electret type microphone. FN is going to be your fine-tune clarifier, and this one is kind of important to know. With the fine-tune clarifier on this radio, you can have it adjust the receive and the transmit simultaneously. You can have it be off, so it doesn't do anything. You can have it adjust only the receive, so it's only adjusting clarifying the receive frequency. You can have it only adjust the transmit frequency, or again, you can have it do both. So it gives you quite a few functions for your clarifier there, which is actually pretty handy for those of you that might be using it in different ways. Next up is our SWR display. So this will allow the radio to show the SWR on the radio when you have that enabled. We'll turn that on and we'll show you that in just a second. Okay, and then the last one here is a reset. This one, be a little careful, because if you get everything just the way you want it and then you key up while you're in this function, it will reset the radio. I'll do it just to show you. I'm holding down the key button and it's in the reset. If I let go, you'll see it's reset the radio. So it will have erased all of the settings and functions that I had in there. So that's the way you can go back to kind of stock and start again. So I've enabled the SWR function in the menu. When you enable it in the menu, from then on, if you key up, you're going to see your SWR right here. So you can see my SWR is right here in the window. And as I'm talking, you'll see over here, it's still showing me my outgoing RF power over there, but this is going to show your SWR. So that is super cool, really easy to use while you're on the road, and very handy to know if you've got a problem. All right, let's talk about the scan feature. If I turn the radio on, I've set it to the squelch type function for the scan. I'll press down the button. You'll see the channels changing quickly while I have the button depressed. But eventually you'll see a little dot. And that dot tells us that the scan function is enabled. And now, the squelch right now is down. You can hear the static. So it won't scan. If I turn up the squelch, it will start scanning. And it will scan until something breaks the squelch, right? That's how it's kind of worked traditionally. So the other option, if I go back into the menu here, is a TI timed function. So if I save that, go back in, and on that one, if I start scanning, well, once it starts, about 8 seconds to pressing the button, scan feature kicks in with the little blinking dot there. If I have the squelch down and you can hear the static, it will still go through the different frequencies, even with the static coming through. If I turn the squelch up, it'll start scanning normally there. So a little bit different function there for the scan function. As soon as you key up, of course, it'll stay on that frequency. Let's talk power for the different modes. FM, saw about 30 watts on the max RF power. AM, saw about 30 watts, max RF power. Upper sideband, lower sideband, about 30 watts. Box says 35. I'm a little stingy on my meters sometimes, I know that, but yeah, probably in the 30 to 35 range is pretty reasonable for this radio. The variable on this in AM mode, when you set it at high, it's about a 10 watt key swinging up about 30. You can turn this all the way down to about a half watt dead key on AM. You can turn it down for all the modes and it'll adjust them, but in AM, if you turn this all the way down, it's about half watt. However, the cool thing is, for you guys that are running equipment where you might want to set a dead key around 2 watts, this will still swing about 15 watts or so from a 2 watt dead key, which is pretty much perfect for a lot of that extra equipment out there that I know you guys like to run on AM. Some of the other radios that were newer that came out, you turn down your dead key to 1 to 2 watts, it would only swing like 6 to 7 watts, and that's why a lot of the guys still preferred the older style radios for that. But this one seems like it might be a good match for that. So cool feature there for the RF power. Let's take a look inside the radio. We'll start with an expanded view. Board is pretty small and compact. They kept a traditional size of the case, so there is a little bit extra room up here, but that shouldn't be a problem for anybody. Finals are in the back here. There's your outside heatsink. This is your antenna jack. Power coming in over here. Big heatsink on the inside of the radio, which is kind of cool. Surface mount, so very small parts. You guys would likely not be able to solder anything in here unless you had some specialized tools. Not that you'd need to, because this radio kind of has everything built in. It's got the NPC built in from the factory. It's got a noise reduction circuit. It's got, what else? Echo. So I know you guys that like to tweak stuff are looking for things to put in and adjust your screwdriver with, but in this radio, really isn't a whole lot you can do to it unless you're in the service menu. Which you really shouldn't need to be in there, in my opinion, because it has the variable power and some other stuff, so I can't really think why you'd need to go in there, but probably at some point that'll come out as well. Let's zoom in and take a little closer look at some of the stuff on the board. One of the things you guys are probably interested in is this spot right here. There's 3 jumpers labeled 1, 2, and 3, and it might be hard to even see it, but there is a little jumper that comes on pins 1 and 2. If you want to expand the radio for additional frequencies, you need to move that little jumper onto the pins 2 and 3. And if you are like me, you may need a magnifying glass and tweezers or something to move it over there. I just put it on with my fingers. But now it's on pins 2 and 3, and that would be the expanded mode. Here's a better view of that heatsink that was on the inside and this big guy underneath that's going to be generating that heat, and that's why they have that heatsink there. I know some of the other radios that came out, they did not have a heatsink on the inside, and the case would get pretty hot over here. So nice to see that. Here's a closer view of the finals in the back of the radio. All right, we turned it around. We're looking the other direction now. You can see the back side of the front of the radio. Channel selector is over in this area. On-off switch is over here. And you can see there's ribbon cables coming off and connecting back with the other board. And let's test out some Roger beeps. Here we go. Number 1. Number 2. Number 3. Number 4. Number 5. So one question I know guys are going to ask is, does it have a frequency display or a frequency counter? And the answer is no, it doesn't. It's kind of more old school in that sense. If you're on channel 40 in the CB band on D and you want to go to 425, 27.425, you're going to have to flip this to E, and then you're going to have to set this to channel 2 on the display here. Yeah, it's not going to tell you exactly where you are. I feel like it's really aimed more towards drivers rather than like a serious freebander / 10 meter user in that sense. So whereas on the the Anytone 666 or the President Lincoln, those ones maybe a little bit more directed at really going onto the freeband. You can definitely get into the freeband, no problem on this thing. It definitely can be used there. If you're a driver, truck driver, or just a user and you want an old school radio and maybe you go to 425 or you go to 555, yeah, you can figure that out pretty easy on this, and then you just can go where you want to. The nice thing is it actually saves your channel setting when you flip the band. So if I go back, you'll see I'm still on channel 40 in the CB band, and if I flip up and go in the upper bands, I'm still on the number 2. So that's actually pretty cool to be able to have it do that. You couldn't do that on the old school radios. So anyway, just something I thought I'd point out. I know that's going to be a question that's going to get asked. Well, we're going to wrap up part 1 there. Yes, there's going to be a part 2 because quite a bit more to go through. I want to get into the software, show you guys some of the options for the echo, monitor levels for the talkback, Roger beeps. Also want to test out the noise reduction circuit for you, show what it sounds like at different levels. And I want to try and get some recordings of the outgoing audio as well on transmit and how the noise reduction circuit works there. Want to mess around with that MPC too. I think that's going to be an interesting one. April 2023 is what I've heard, so they should be coming to you soon. And yeah, classic styling with the new features. They've done a cool job of mixing in those new features onto the face and then having some of the other ones in the menu. This is the Ares II from Anytone. And yeah, stick around. We'll have that part 2 coming soon. Thanks for watching CB Radio Magazine.